Welcome everyone. Last time we took a look at how to break down a project and why we would want to break it down. And today we're going to take a quick look at how to debug your project. If there's something you want to see or something that you need help with or something, feel free to leave a comment and maybe we'll do that for the next video. If you are new to coding, you may not even know what the term debugging means. And debugging means to identify and remove both bugs and errors from hardware and software. Now, this can be an application, such as the to-do list we have here. This could be a video game that you are developing, or it could be a plugin, a tool, pretty much anything. But what's important is that you learn how to find the problems that you're having. And if you're lucky, some of them will be directly right in your face, so that you can easily find them, fix them, move on. But others are going to require a little more digging in order to find out what exactly is going on. So the easiest method, I would say, would be if we have something like, alright, so whatever we put in there, if we were to run this, the easiest is going to be an error like this that's just announced directly in your face. Now this tells us it's an error on line 33, starting with the first character. And it tells us directly that the method print is not declared in this current class. And it also tells us down here in the debugger that this is a parsing error. And that is true, because in here we have to use a lowercase p to print. But in here, this is usually pretty good, and most times you'll get that red line that you saw there before you even run the project. So you see, if I go like this will just pop up because it's not going to identify it. So usually it's pretty good at identifying, but occasionally you'll still run into simple errors like that that'll pop up that you won't see until runtime. And those are going to be the easiest ones to identify and point out, because they're pretty much told you, here's the error. Alright, we gotta stop running that. They're pretty much saying, here's the error, here's what's happening, this is why we got a problem. So that's the easiest way of doing that. Now, the tried and true method that like everyone does is printing. Now, you can use printing for a variety of different things. I usually use them to see if certain functions or acts inside of a function is triggering, such as if a condition actually returning true in an if statement, I'll put a print inside of it to make sure that that's actually firing. Or we could do, for example, inside of our for loop here, right, we can do a print inside show list for loop. Right, and if we were to run that, we can go ahead and go like that, and we can see it's printing down here in the console. So I know that when I hit that button to trigger this function, I am getting inside of this for loop. So if I'm getting inside of this for loop, then we want to take a look at why something may or may not be happening, if the issue that we're narrowing down is happening in here. So example, if if our list items aren't actually being displayed, but we know we're getting inside our for loop, then we get to start taking a look at, in this case, our instance here, make sure our spelling and everything is correct. Take a look at our path for our child. Or maybe it's just a text that's not getting set right, so we can then come down and immediately take a look at that. So either way, we can take a look at it, and that at least provides us a little more information. But printing is not going to get us all the way there. For something like that, we would use breakpoints. Now, to use a breakpoint, you're actually just going to click into this little white space here on any of the lines, and you'll see your mouse cursor change to the hand. So, for example, if I click on line 37 here, and say 39, 40, and 38. All right. So if we were to run this now, all right, we've hit our breakpoint. We're on our main scene. Yeah, all right, so we're running into the breakpoint here because we don't know what our list is. All right, we're looking at show list. And what's nice is when we're in a breakpoint like this, we can take a look down at the bottom of the screen at our debugger. We can see we hit a breakpoint. We have our stack frames here. It tells you the order going from the bottom up. So you see inside of our ready function, we're calling show list. And then inside of our show list is where our breakpoint is. And if we actually turn our heads over to the right, we can see our local variables, which is L. So where we have it here, for L in data.key. So we see what L is. And L is currently list 1. And list, we can see what that is, which is currently an array, size of 2. And if we were to click that, we can actually see both items in there. So we can see inside of there, we have 2 items, and they're called list 1 and list 2. And then we can come down to members. We've got self, which should point to itself. Which if you would just look at that, you can click on it. Then up in the inspector, we have a path up here, and you can see the path up here. If you were to follow that, that would point directly to what node. So if you have something that ever says object, you can just take a look at that in the inspector, and you can see the full path to it. And the full path that it's referring to is actually in the remote tree on the left-hand side here. Let me just move that out of the way. So the path is right on up here. Right up here. And I'm just gonna pull that down here for now. And again, your object down here. So if you have an issue, click on that. Look up in the inspector, and you should have the path. And for that path, it's not going off of your tree here. It's going off our remote, which is your actual live tree. This is what's happening as the actual project is running. So if we were to follow that tab, it's going to take us in. We're going to come in, new object, ready. In this case, it's going straight to our main, because that's our self. So it's taking us right here. So root and main. And then you have some options here as we go in. So right now, you see L is list 1. If we look at our object here, we can see we have a new object. We have a confirm button, label, and all that. New dialog, scroll container. We have a VBox, but we haven't nothing inside of it yet. So what we can do is we can continue, and then we get to the add child part. Now notice that it's not inside of our VBox yet, and that's because we haven't added it in, right? We're about to add it in. We're on this line. So once we step over this, then in our remote here, we're going to see our list get thrown in, at least the first item in it. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now we see it has a child. It's called list item, and it's got its list, it's got its delete button, and all those goodies. And now we're going to actually rename this node. And again, we can see any info that we need to down here in our debugger as we go through our breakpoint. So we step into the next. It's been renamed. It is now list 1. And of course, now we're going to get that node text. Yep, we set it. And now we're setting the text field of it. And then, of course, we're going to loop through again and do the same thing for list 2. There we go. And then we're done. We've gone through all of our breakpoints. So that's how you can use breakpoints to kind of see what's going on as your code is going through, in addition to the remote tree, where you can visually see what's happening, and the breakpoints help you see what's happening behind the scenes. And the final type that we can use to help us on our debugger is errors. Is the error tab down there. Let me just bring this back up. So if I were to go into my list, in this case I can click on microphone, because on the desktop this is not actually going to trigger. It's actually going to come up with a warning because I can't access this if I'm not on mobile. And you can see in this case I got an invalid, non-existent function listen on base nil. So when we have an error like this, we can also take a look over on the right hand side without using a breakpoint. And we can see self, main, list, incomplete, all this stuff going on. Which is great, but then we got STT, this is what it's referring to as no. And that's because this specific singleton, this plugin, cannot run on desktop. It's specifically made for mobile devices. So in my case, this is my issue. I'm trying to use something that doesn't exist on desktop. Something that doesn't work on desktop. And alternatively, you can come to the errors page here, and you have a lot of yellow ones. These are considered warnings. They're things that you may or may not want to trigger, and they don't really hurt anything. They're just kind of a heads up. So for example, if we had something that doesn't, like here, button press, this is something that it's referring to here, right here, on this line. If I want to ignore it, I could just put an underscore in front of it like that, like so. And then that's telling it to, even though there's a parameter that is mandatory for me to put in, just ignore it. Just ignore the fact that we're not using it. So if we were to run it again and do that same thing, you see we come in and that warning is no longer here. Now, of course, we can also come in and take a look. You can click on it. You can right click it. You can copy your error. You can look at the source code on GitHub if you needed to. But the easiest way is between just doing that, or in this case, if you don't have that, you're not able to do that, such as with this connection returns a value but is never used. You can actually come over to the right hand side here to this little yellow triangle. Click on that. And you can hit ignore, and that'll actually post a comment above it, like so, which is just a comment saying warning-ignore, return underscore value discarded. So it's saying to ignore the warning at this part of the return value being discarded, which is specifically what's going on. Now, if we had that in our button pressed section here, we would have a different. We could have a different situation. So let's take a look. Let's come down here, and you can just type these in if you wanted, these comments in the right spot. You don't have to hit the ignore button if you know what they are. So you can see here, return value discarded, and for the button press, it would be unused argument. So if we hit ignore, we'll get that same comment, but with the unused argument pushed in. So warning-ignore, unused argument. So you can go ahead, you can put comments in yourself. If you want to ignore some of that, you could wait and use the ignore button down here, or you can just completely ignore the errors that are popping up there. Alternatively, if those are really bugging you, and you really just don't want to go through all those, and you know all the warnings are fine anyway, there is a spot in here. Is it not? Maybe it's in the project settings. There we go. Debug, GDScript, and you can treat warnings as errors, so you have that option. But if you're, of course, don't go to that save, you can see, so you can enable warnings altogether if you wanted. But you can see you can have a lot of options here that you can turn on and off for your warnings. And if you really wanted to go extreme, make sure you got all of those. You can tell to treat warnings as errors. And if we had that on, you see, now we have complete errors that are going on here. Because now this value isn't being returned as true, but I have to. Or it returns a value, but it's not being used. Now I have to address this and fix this. Now, obviously, that's a little on the extreme side, and that's completely up to your preference on if you want to do that. And, of course, again, that's being treated as an actual warning. You see, now we can just ignore that since we turned that off. But that's going to be completely up to you how you want to go about it. But those are all the different ways that we can go about debugging a project to find out what's wrong with it. There we go. Get rid of that line. But that's how we can go through our project, debug it, see what's wrong, and try to fix it, address it. Because the first thing to do, we can't solve the problem unless we know what the problem is. And coding is all about problem solving. But alright, take care. That's how you do your debugging.